I'm old. I'm satisfied.
Oh, no, no.
And you were my purpose.
No.
Cause no, really, if you were not tearing up or getting a little choked up by the end of this episode, I just assume you have no heart, man. Episode 3 of The Last of Us has now premiered, so you know that means it's time for me to give you my spoiler review. I'll be giving you my recap, breakdown, pointing out some Easter eggs you might have missed, really diving into the big differences they made here from the video game into the show. So far, everything had been extremely faithful to what you would have played in the first couple of hours of The Last of Us. In episode 3, they finally went a completely different direction, not too far off, but enough where I think it left fans of the video game a little surprised by the end of this episode, and honestly for the better. I'll get more in detail about it here, but The Last of Us is one of those rare adaptations where as I'm watching it, I'm telling myself, I like the way they're doing it here better than the video game, just being honest. But I know not everybody loved this episode. I'm already seeing some of the comments calling it a filler episode, a waste of an episode. Where's Joel and Ellie? Okay, here we go. Now, you're totally valid for feeling that way, but let's just start from the beginning and work our way through this episode. So we start off with the morning after Tess's death, where we see Joel is kind of grieving it a bit in his own way, stacking rocks, exactly what I do whenever I lose a loved one. But really, most notably, I feel like tension between Joel and Ellie is still high. He doesn't exactly want to protect this girl. He doesn't exactly feel any admiration for her, and I would even say Ellie almost the same way. One of the biggest things I was noticing from the way the show was handling their small interactions as they were walking together compared to the video game is in the video game when you would have these like random off conversations when you're walking to the next town or the next checkpoint building, whatever in the game, the little back and forth between Joel and Ellie was a little bit more friendlier, was a little bit more happier. You can see that they were starting to grow a bond as the game was progressing, and here in the show when they're like arriving to the convenience store, I just don't feel that Joel completely admires Ellie yet. To be a little bit more specific here, like when Ellie points out this arcade machine that is something directly pulled from the games, except in the game it was this made-up arcade machine that doesn't exist. Here they transferred it out for a Mortal Kombat machine, but the dialogue is similar.
Would you play this before?
No, but I had a friend that knew everything about this game.
I was never a big fan of these things.
You ever play this one? I had a friend who knew everything about this game. Oh, man.
And that's what I mean. You can tell Joel is a little softer on her, is a little willing to open up with her, where here in the show you can still kind of feel that closed off feeling that Joel has this wall in front of him. Also worth pointing out this moment Ellie has with the infected and just how fascinated she is by cutting him open, seeing what's inside of him, and then killing him. This is something that the creative team of the HBO series kind of wants to put in the forefront, is this fascination of violence and death that Ellie has, because once we get to the second season, that is now confirmed, and they adapt the events of the second game, Ellie is one violent individual. Eventually bringing us here to where Joel and Ellie witness some bodies, skeletons on the floor of innocent civilians that probably were not infected but were gotten rid of, similar to Joel's daughter Sarah, flashing us back to the beginning of their pandemic with the cordyceps all the way in 2003. And look, here's where I'll play devil's advocate to the people that are kind of upset with this episode, calling it a filler, a waste of time, I just want to see Joel and Ellie, and all that kind of stuff. I can kind of understand where you're coming from, because back when I would watch The Walking Dead, I dreaded episodes that would be entirely based on backstories of random characters that would be dead by the end of that season, and I'd go, what was the point of learning that backstory and wasting a whole episode on them? It's something commonplace with apocalyptic shows, is getting that full episode backstory on certain characters, so I'm not entirely surprised that there is a group of people that weren't happy with this episode, but for me personally, as a fan of the games, I was never a big fan of the Bill character. It's always a section of the game I find so annoying just because he's an unlikable character, he's rude to Ellie, he's rude to Joel, almost unbearable, but I guess for good reason. The man is survivalist, he doesn't trust anybody, and that's what's gotten him to survive thus far. But even with him being unlikable, he's a memorable part of the show. He's a character I was kind of excited to see how they would handle it, and I was not expecting them to make him so likable. Not only does this show give us great flashbacks to how Bill was able to be the survivalist and have an entire town to himself, because in the video game, as we're going on our way to meet Bill, we do come across his booby traps and we get snippets of backstory from Joel, and the HBO show kind of gives us the liberty to see all that, and I thought that was fun on its own. But the biggest change here is the way the relationship between Bill and Frank went down, because in the video game, let me tell you, that relationship did not end pretty at all. We don't even get to to meet Frank's character in the Last of Us video game because he hung himself. And the reason he hung himself was even more depressing. He was the partner of Bill, which yes, in the game they were gay together. Don't think they changed that for the show, because I've already seen some people try to say that. But Frank details a letter that he is so miserable living in the apocalypse, but even more miserable that he has to go through with it with Bill. That he would just rather off himself than live another day with him. And I'm like, damn, that just goes to show you how unlikable Bill was in the game. And for a while in the show, it seemed like maybe they were headed in that route. They started off in that honeymoon phase like most couples, and then cut 3 years later, they're fighting with each other. Another 3 years, they're bickering again. I thought it was going to get to that stage where Frank was going to hang himself in a Hawaiian shirt, because that's how you do it, apparently. But instead, it turned out to be one of the most tragic and beautiful love stories ever put on television, man. Like, this was just heartbreaking in some of the best ways. I mentioned it's a cliche in these apocalyptic zombie-type shows to give a whole episode dedicated to some backstory. What this episode did is not only dedicate so much backstory to memorable characters from the games, it gave us a mini movie of two people in love stuck in the apocalypse. I'm watching their relationship, the garden they have going on, the lights, the fancy cooking, and I'm thinking to myself, honestly, if I was in the zombie apocalypse and this was my life the rest of the way through, I would be so lucky. Trust me, there are enough depressing things that happens as the Last of Us story progresses from this game and the second game. It was kind of nice just to get this one-off story. Even the way they included Tess and Joel into these flashbacks, interlinking their stories to where Joel has a reason to bring Ellie there, because the only piece of information that we get in the game is that Bill owes Joel a favor, which we never find out what that is. I honestly just can't stress enough how much I love the way they handled this, and it's so much better done than it was in the game. I do see some fans mention that they feel cheated out of some cool action sequences that happen between Joel and Bill in the town. Like, one in memory is when Joel is hanging upside down and he's got to shoot at clickers and runners. I was kind of hoping they would recreate that for the show here, and this would have been the perfect time. And they could honestly still recreate this just at a different point with different context. But I'm honestly way more happier with a story I was invested in, with characters I actually grew to really like and care about, than just bang bang clickers dying left and right. Like, that could get boring after a while. So I'll definitely say be patient and wait for some of those moments that you liked from the game that could be inserted somewhere else. But this honestly really worked for me, even with the outcome that both Bill and Frank are dead by the time Joel and Ellie arrive. Because really the whole point of that Bill section in the video game is just to end that mission with Joel and Ellie having a car, and that's exactly what happens by the end of this episode. Joel and Ellie have a car. The way we got to that destination might be a little different, but I feel it only improves the show and kind of gives you a better appreciation for the game. Even here in this moment where Ellie is reading the letter that Bill left for Joel, that sentence Bill puts in there about protecting the ones he loves.
That's why men like you and me are here. We have a job to do, and God help any motherfuckers who stand in our way.
That is some great foreshadowing for things we're about to see where Joel has to protect Ellie down the line. It showed to me how much Joel loved Tess, even if he wasn't willing to admit it, the similar way Bill had trouble showing his love for Frank. It was a parallel relationship that they kind of had, and now we're seeing those stepping stones where Joel is going to now grow some admiration for Ellie and protect her no matter what. So yeah, episode 3 of The Last of Us continues to be amazing. They pull out Easter eggs left and right, like they got Ellie in her classic attire by the end of this episode, but it's these changes that they're making that are working out for the better in the show that makes me so excited to see if they're going to make any big changes when those big moments arrive towards the end. Let me know what you guys thought about episode 3 of The Last of Us. Do you like this change they made to Bill and Frank's story? Your favorite Easter egg from the episode? Anything, everything? Be sure and like, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.